Hello everyone. This videocast is an introduction to design patterns and then I will discuss about the MVC design pattern. My name is Thiago. I'm a software developer and this is my blog where I used to write about software engineering and also my Twitter. Okay, let's start. So for this videocast, the agenda is I'll talk about design pattern. Why do I have to use the design pattern? I will discuss about MVC. It's a design pattern and we are gonna see with more detail. And for the last, an exercise just to memorize what we learned during the videocast. So what's design patterns? So it's a description or template for how to solve a problem. And that can be used in many different situations. Patterns are formalized best practices that programmers must implement themselves in their application. So the main point here is to organize the application so that we can increase our productivity and make it easy to separate tasks to the team. Also, create an application easy to support and sensible to technology changes. And that's it. Why do we have to use? So, to explain why do we have to use, I will give an example where in this example we are gonna see the impact of using and without using design patterns. So that's the example. You have to develop a web application for a customer. Alright, so pretty simple. You're a developer and you have to develop a web application. Alright. So to develop this application, you spent 40-60 hours of work. Alright. It's a kind of big project. And your customer is very happy with the application, and after 1 year of usage his small business grows and he wants to change. He wants to be more competitive. He realized that his main competitor uses an iPhone to manage his company, and then he orders you to transform the application interface to web mobile interface. Alright? That's pretty simple. So you have a project, you develop a project, and now you have to change just the interface. So you work in a software house and they have the Microsoft Visual Studio framework. So you can choose ASP.NET Web Forms or you can use ASP.NET MVC. When you use a ASP.NET Web Form, you don't use design patterns, alright? When you use the ASP.NET MVC, you use a design pattern, alright? So you have these two options. So let's simulate without using design patterns. Assume that you're a programmer, but you don't have knowledge on design patterns. You decide to create a web form ASP.NET application, and to get this done on time, you mix the business logic with the user interface code. Alright? So you mess a little bit with the code. The main point is that. So let's calculate how much it costs to the customer. So you spend 460 hours. Imagine that your work hour costs $80, so that will cost you the customer $37,000. Yeah. So when the customer asks you to change the user interface, you analyze the code. So and then you realize that the application code is 80% of the code, and the reusable code is just 20%. So you have the application code that is very mixed, you can reuse that, and you realize that 20% is reusable. It's very, very, very reasonable, right? So to rebuild this new interface, you're going to reuse 20% of the code. It will cost almost $30,000. All right. So the customer will reuse the code he paid, and you save around $80,000. All right. But now we're gonna simulate using design patterns, and you're gonna see the difference. Supposing that you're a good programmer and you have knowledge on design patterns, and in this case MVC, alright? You could adapt the problem into separate layers, alright? And you can reuse the code more effectively. Alright? So now you develop this application using design patterns, and you're gonna see the difference, right? For this example, the work hour costs the same $80, and you spend the same 460 hours, and the application costs the same, almost $37,000. All right. But now you analyze the code and you check. Now you have 60% is the user interface, and 40% is the business logic. So 60% of the code is the user interface, and 40% is not. So the reusable code is 40% now, all right? So we can reuse the code we developed, and that will cost less when we have an update. So to rebuild a new interface, you're going to reuse 40% of the code, and that will cost $22,000, and we are saving without using design patterns, and we are saving almost $7,400. All right. Yeah, it's a great amount of money, and I think it really represents on the costs. All right. So what is MVC? If you look through the internet, there are many kind of diagrams. As you can see, I just picked some diagrams from the internet. For me, they are very confused. They represent what they represent, not what they want to mean. So it's really hard to understand. There are many arrows, boxes that nobody understands. So I think that all the diagrams that we have in the internet, they are very hard to understand. But I think you can improve these diagrams. So I created a new diagram that explains how the MVC works in a very different way, and it uses a real case as analogy. All right. So MVC means model, view, and controller. All right. It represents three different layers. the layer model, layer view, and layer controller. All right. So just to clarify what happens between those layers, I use analogy of the restaurant analogy, right? So when you go to a restaurant, if you're a user or the customer of this restaurant, you sit on a table and then you have the menu, all right? That represents the view. Also, we have the waiter that gets the information from you and takes to the kitchen, all right, to the chef in the kitchen. Imagine that this layer comprehends the waiter is the controller layer, and we have the model, also known as business layer, all right. So that's pretty simple. We slice the code, and we have the code where represents the user interface. So that's the view. All right. We have a controller that gets information from the user interface and sends to the business logic and gets the information, the processed information, and return to the user. So he does the same thing as the waiter in the restaurant, all right? And also we have, and for last we have the kitchen, and the chef is where we process the information, where we process the what the user wants, all right? And we give the controller. All right, with that in mind, we are going to see a detailed MVC diagram. It's more complex, but with the previously explication, we are going to see how it works inside. All right. So, like I said, we have a business logic layer, also known as a model layer. All right. This is the logic of the. Here we have all the logic of the application, all right? All the application logic. You have the controllers. This detail, the diagram, is specific for a web application because we have the application controller and also we have the input controller, all right? And that's the controller layer, and for the last we have the view. Now you're gonna see with more detail each layer. So the model layer. This layer comprehends the problem space and only contains data structures and business objects. Its members should not be coupled to other layers. Since we have this business logic, it doesn't really change during the process, during the software development or the software updates, because what changes really often is in general it's the user interface and how it communicates with the business layer. So this layer is really preserved and it can be coupled to other layers, all right? Because when we have a change, user interface change, it doesn't change, all right? The business layer is also split into two layers: the business objects layers and the data access layer. So why do we split in two layers? The data access layer is responsible for persisting and restoring the data structures from database. And the business objects layer represents all data structures and business objects. So The data access layer intermediates the business objects layers and the database storage. So when we change the database interface, we just have to change the data access layer, all right? Just to preserve that. Okay? That's why we separate into two layers. So now we're going to talk about the application controller. All right. It coordinates logic related to the application flow, handles errors, maintains long-term states, and determines which view to display. All right. So it gets the information from the input controller and sent to the business layer. The business layer return the information, and he will notify the view or the user through the view, the user to the view, what was processed. All right. And then we have the input controller. So the input controller parses inputs, determines the parameter parsing mechanisms, extracts any necessary information from the request, cooperates with the application controller to determine the next action, and invokes the action in the correct context. Alright? That's pretty simple. On web applications, these layers is maps all the URLs. Alright? And for the last, the view. So the view handles application and business logic. Only code directly related to current page is allowed. So it's just HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery, whatever. But in the case of a web application, but just code directly related to current page. Alright. And also, page should not know about the application flow and should not decide what view to display next. Alright? It's the application controller responsibility to decide what view to display next. So, we finish here, and for last we have an exercise just to memorize what we learned here. And that's pretty simple. It's just to memorize, right? Imagine that you have to design a call center system using MVC model. Each image below represents a component of support request. Post in the comments the corresponding MVC layer for each image. Alright? And that's it. If you have any question, you can mail me or send me a Twitter or post in the comments or in my blog, whatever. And that's the reference I used to create this videocast. And that's it. Thank you.